lave a seyon bul cap wule upa konen kote lap rete. So in 1778, I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, but I'm sure you have a decent understanding of the Haitian Revolution by now. So in the fall of 1798, there were rumors that another uprising, like the uprising of 1791, was going to happen again. The uprising of 1791, the voodoo celebration out in the middle of the Crocodile Woods that whips the slaves into such a frenzy that they start a revolution. They didn't know what they were doing. They never heard of the word revolution, but they're at Crocodile Forest, sitting there in Crocodile Forest, hanging out with their buddies, dancing, spitting and just laughing, having a good time. And they're like, you know what? It's nice being free. Maybe we should fight for it. Men appeal chez Palu. So in 1798, you're going to have this man named Houdeville. So Haideville. So Haideville is another piece of shit that came in there to try to take power away from Toussaint Louverture. And so the reaction of Toussaint's adoptive nephew, Moysey, or Moyse, I think it's Moyse, but I'm going to mess it up and say Moysey the whole time because I like it better. Just like I like Janot Bullet. Janot Bullet was the slave of Monsieur Boulet. Okay, well, I'm not going to carry on the Boulet bullshit, okay? The Monsieur Boulet was a harsh master, and then Janot Bullet was a harsh, a wartime general. So is it that big of a surprise, right, after you've gone through so much violence and humiliation that you would become violent? And you'd want to humiliate, do the exact same what was done to you, to others? I don't think it's that far of a stretch to think that Janot Bullet learned his aggressive and violent tactics and his violent mannerisms from Monsieur Boulet, who was the owner of the biggest plantation in the island. Galifet? Was he actually Galifet? I'm not sure if he was at Galifet or not. Dalo Haitian ou American, Dalo Vet. And one cool thing about Galifet is one of the biggest plantations. It was an absentee landlord. He wasn't even there. So the Galifet is where the first slave uprising had happened, but it got quashed before it turned into a general insurrection. But by the end, you're going to have Henry Christophe build the Citadel Henrietta, or La Citadel, whatever, La Citadel, and on the Galifet plantation. So that's a nice, it's kind of in ruins right now, but it's the idea of the fort being right there on the edge of the island is to prevent any invading forces from coming up, and it was right there on the Galifet plantation. So just symbolically, instead of it being the biggest plantation, now it's the biggest fort in defense of the new Black Republic. Combien peut tout trouver la fine net? So by the time Houdeville gets to the island, you have Moysey, and him and Houdeville is not interacting very well. Okay, I think Houdeville is just trying to take power. He already has power. He's just trying to sow seeds of discord, playing a game with Rigaud versus Toussaint. So he was showing Rigaud so much more love and affection and attention, and then just kind of being dismissive of Toussaint. And it was obvious what he was doing, and Moysey saw it, so Moysey was pissed off. Moysey at the time was commanding Fort Liberté, so he's at Fort Liberté, and he says that agent, Haideville wants to diminish the troops when I want to increase my regiment. If there are no soldiers, there won't be any more general. Moysey was also more and more openly hostile to labor policies which would attach former slaves to their former plantations regardless of their source. So Moysey is getting more and more pissed off at Toussaint's essential re-enslavement. Okay, so this is before the 1801 Constitution, and this is before the Declaration of Independence, which would be the biggest accomplishments of the Haitian Revolution, and the abolition of slavery. But apparently under Toussaint Louverture, there was a kind of de facto slavery, sort of like when slaves got freedom here, right, in 1863, Emancipation Proclamation, and Civil War was over, there was still a de facto segregation. There was still a de facto, not slavery, but sometimes on the farms where they were sharecroppers now, and they were totally dependent on the boss to pay them, and how can you compel them to pay them? You can't. Dis-moi-si ou pas comprendre. So Haitian is basically a sinister poison on the island. He is, not doing good for Toussaint, and he's fucking a lot of shit up. So Toussaint should have sent Haitian packing a long time ago, but he's afraid about Moysey at Fort Liberté, okay? So he's like, I've been listening to a lot of stuff. There was a big fight that broke out between the soldiers of the 5th Regiment, commanded by Moyse at Fort Liberté, and the planters. So the French white slave owners, the former slave owners, and Moyse's not getting along. Big fucking shocker here, right? But at the time, Toussaint is trying to bring everybody together, but apparently the rebels could be killed, but if the planters were disobedient, he would just deport them. Dis-moi-si ou pas comprendre. So Haiteville was alarmed enough by the situation to order Moyse replaced by Manigat, a black magistrate in the town, backed by some of the few white troops at the agent's disposal. Moyse was away on a tour of inspection of the countryside when Manigat took over, and when he returned, Manigat declared Moyse a rebel. After an exchange of gunfire between Manigat's supporter and his own, Moyse left town with many men of the 5th Regiment and began raising the field workers of the Northern Plain in an insurrection against Haiteville. By some accounts, Toussaint met Moyse at Harcourt Plantation and helped coordinate the rising. Ujuin travail là. So eventually they're going to send Haiteville out of, Haiti. He's going to leave October 22nd, 1798. And the way that he did it, it was like, okay, I'll get on the ship, but what guarantee do I have that you won't fire upon me? So they allowed some of his soldiers to walk along with him onto the boat. So a few of Moyse's officers were on the boat with Haiteville just so they wouldn't fire upon him as it was leaving. So he leaves for France on October 22nd, 1798. He lasted for less than 1 year on Haiti. As a parting shot, he transferred all of his authority as a representative of the French government to General Andre Rigaud. I believe he's a mulatto, and he was the favorite, right? He was the favorite son, and he was trying to sow discord. And eventually you're going to have the War of Knives. You're going to have a civil war. In the middle of the Haitian Revolution, you're going to have a civil war, 1799 to 1800, and it's going to be between Andre Rigaud, mulattoes of the South, and Toussaint Louverture, and the blacks and white planters, or I guess maybe the white planters were always around. I don't know where these white planters are, but Andre Rigaud is going to fight from the south, and Toussaint Louverture is going to fight from the north. Pagin, my lady Key, Pagin, Remed. So Moyse was there, man. Moyse was there in the beginning. Moyse continues to be there. Moyse was there during when Toussaint Louverture had allied with the Spanish in the first war for independence from 1791 to 1795. The first part when Toussaint Louverture was fighting against the French. Not the middle of the revolution when he was fighting in defense of the French. In the beginning, he was part Spanish, and Moyse was right there. That's why he adopted him as his nephew. Moyse was one of his favorites, just like Charles Belair was. And Dessalines is going to kill Charles Auguste Belair, and Toussaint Louverture is going to kill Moyse. They're killing their own people. They'd rather kill their own people than to go after the planters. They're deporting the planters. They're being all lovey-dovey with this Napoleon fleet and all these people that the French keep on sending out to them, even though they're hostile, they're sowing seeds of discord. They're not friendly. They're not being nice. They're trying to wrest power away from Toussaint Louverture. They didn't like, even though he is unabashedly French, loves French culture, loves the motherland, wants to be a colony of the motherland, they don't give a shit. They don't care. Rete tranquille. Rete tranquille. So the French are going to send this other guy out, this Roume, R-O-U-M-E, Roume. So Roume comes back, but then they eventually throw him to the chicken house, at the Don chicken house. So the French keep on sending these agents, and they keep on saying that they have the power when clearly Toussaint does. Now, Toussaint is going to invade Santo Domingo, the right side of Haiti, the Spanish side, the current Dominican Republic. There was a treaty that had said that the whole island was French, but the French never enforced it, okay? So even though they had a treaty, they had an agreement, the Spanish stayed. So this is Toussaint Louverture's way of saying, no, we're going to go ahead and take over this whole island. So Toussaint actually does unify. He wins this. So 1799, April 27th, he notified Governor Don Garcia, governor of the Spanish side of Haiti, that he meant to carry out Roumet's order of April 27 by sending Moyse with a sufficient force to take control of the eastern portion of the island for France. Pas bouger. Pas bouger. Don Garcia used to be Toussaint Louverture's former commander when he was in the Spanish service. So it used to be Don Garcia. And you're going to have Charles IV. Charles IV is the king all throughout of Spain during the Haitian Revolution. So anytime you talk about the Spanish, that's the monarch that you're talking about. Carlos IV, King Charles IV. So Don Garcia receives Toussaint's ultimatum on January 6th. 3,000 men were commanded by Moyse. They crossed at Ouanaminthe. So Ouanaminthe, while 4,500 led by Toussaint and Paul Louverture came via Mirabales. The Spanish defense crumpled very soon. Jean Latte was defeated by Paul Louverture at the Nisao River, and Toussaint received a delegation letting him know that since both Jean Latte and the French general Kervessu had abruptly fled on the board bound for Venezuela, there would be no further opposition to a peaceful takeover. By that time, Moyse's force was 2 days' march from Ciudad Santo Domingo, where they were afraid of Jean-Francois' massacre at Fort Liberté. Jean-Francois Papillon, they're talking about Papillon, Yeti Map Vinay, Yeti Map Vinay. John Adams was in favor of an independent Haiti. So was Maitland, who was speaking for British, but he went ahead and resisted it. Toussaint Louverture resisted all these pushes for independence. So he had like a de facto independence. Nobody was telling him what to do. His mentality, and that's the biggest problem with the oppressed, is, you know, one of the best weapons, one of the most potent weapons for the oppressors is the mind of the oppressed. The mind of the oppressed. If you think you have no power, if you think you have no point, if you think Massa is all powerful and all great and all wonderful, and you just hold on to the French culture instead of just establishing yourself. Toussaint Louverture smashed Rigaud's rebellion. Rigaud, he smashed him. Moyse was there. Moyse was there fighting against Rigaud during that civil war. Moyse was there invading Santo Domingo, invading the Spanish side of the island. Moyse was there in the very beginning when he was fighting against the French forces with Toussaint Louverture, when the Spanish had allied with them, was giving them weapons and money. Moyse was there the whole time. Toussaint Louverture's wife was named Suzanne, and he also had 3 sons, or 4, or 5, or 10. But the ones that we know about are Isaac Louverture and Placide, 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 fucking French, man. Toussaint Louverture's master from his original plantation was Bayon de Libertat. And Bayon de Libertat is going to get killed. He's going to get killed in 1801. So Dessalines was his main pit bull to St. Louverture's, and Dessalines said blacks just don't know how to work if you don't force them. So he loved going around, not with the whip, right? He said that he would use his own hands. So he went around spanking, literally spanking these adults to make sure that they go out and slave. Dessalines caned recalcitrant workers without prejudice. Sometimes unproductive overseers were also beaten. Right proprietors on underproducing plantations might be flogged as well, to prove that Dessalines had no favoritism towards him. When the abuse of the cane became widespread, Toussaint ordered issues against it. So instead of using the whip, because the whip was outlawed, Dessalines was using the cane. He was using the cane. Right? Then when he wasn't allowed to use the cane, then he switches to a leathery shrub that was common all over the Artibonite plain. I beat you with Baja Hyundai. So Baja Hyundai. I beat with Baja Hyundai, he cried. Oh yes, I beat. So he's very proud of it, right? Then there's Canton Louverture. So General Moyse was there the whole time. He was instrumental there at commanding Fort Liberté. He was instrumental in expulsing, kicking Hauteville out of the colony. He was there, man. He was there fighting against the Spanish. He was there when the Spanish were giving them arms and guns, and then he went and fought against the Spanish side of the island. Moyse stayed by Toussaint Louverture's side. And he said a lot of things. In October 1800, you had Toussaint sit there and ask, does Haiduville believe he could scare me? I've been making war for a long time, and if I have to keep on with it, I'm ready. I've had business with 3 nations, and I've beaten all 3. Also, I'm calm in the knowledge that my soldiers will always be firm in the defense of their liberty. If France has more people, let her keep them to fight the English. She won't have too many. She already lost 22,000 men in our country. If she continues to send any more, they'll meet the same fate. I don't want to go to war with France. I've saved this country for her up to now. But if she comes to attack me, I'll have to defend myself. I have no choice. Moyse, he hated whites even more bitterly than Dessalines, who had still a more intransigent attitude. I don't think Dessalines is going to hate the whites like Moyse does until after the revolution, until after Toussaint Louverture is killed. So not until October 1802 is Dessalines, and then I think he has to. I mean, you've been sitting there beating and killing all these black rebels on the plantation, and now you're on their side. So what was up there, Dessalines? So not only did he have to be extra cruel to the French because of what the French were doing, the French were excessively cruel, but he also had to be cruel to the French because he had been cruel to his own people. So they had to fuck with his conscience, right? Wouldn't it? If you were just sitting there been beating the crap out of your own people and, killing them and murdering them and then just supporting the whites and, sitting there just being... There's a man, Malenfant, he was talking to Leclerc, Charles Leclerc, who's eventually going to die of yellow fever. The Captain General, a few days before the fleet sailed, Leclerc accused Malenfant of cowardice. He's saying, you're a coward, okay? What, you're not going to fight Toussaint? He was like, no, you just don't understand what you're up against, okay? He's got lots of money. He's got lots of troops. I wouldn't even go into that country with 60 soldiers behind me. I just wouldn't go after him. So he said, I wouldn't even go after him with 60,000 soldiers. Toussaint is a badass. So Malenfant had a lot of respect for him, but Leclerc, he did not. Here's what Clerc said to Malenfant when he was sitting there saying, Toussaint was so great. Leclerc says, all the niggers, when they see an army, will lay down their arms. They will be only too happy that we pardon them. That's how the French looked at the black people. That's how Leclerc looked at Toussaint and Moyse and Dessalines and all of them. He looked at them all as just a bunch of niggers. That's it. And with the way France is going now, falling in line with Britain, falling in line with the U.S., La Pen, now we're going to go ahead and... So we see the racism in France still persists today. So in the north, around Plaisance, Limbe, Dondon, the vanguard of the revolution was not happy with Toussaint Louverture. They were not happy with the new regime. While his discipline was hard, they want to say that it's not slavery, but it is slavery. The biggest thing that the old black revolutionaries in the north had complained about was that they were working with, still on the same plantation with the white masters. They were still on the same plantation with the white masters. And that's how Toussaint wanted it, right? Let's all work together. Moyse was the commandant of the North Province. And Moyse sympathized with the blacks. Work, yes, but not for whites. Whatever my old uncle may do, I cannot bring myself to be the executioner of my color. It is always in the interest of the metropolis that he scolds me, but these interests are those of the whites, and I shall only love them when they've given me back the eye that they made me lose in battle. So gone were the days when Toussaint Louverture, even though he was trying to, bridge the gap, but he was clearly, for the planters, they had the money, they had the wealth, he admired Baron de Libertant, his massa, and, but he would go around and ride, and he would ask the laborers how they were being treated, and he at least showed an interest in whether or not they were being treated, respectfully. So the revolutionaries of the North, we'll say this is Moyse's rebellion, okay? So Moyse's rebellion, they were prepared to overthrow the government, including Toussaint Louverture, overthrow the French planters, and, establish by we the people have a, fuck slavery, right? This wasn't just a mere riot of a few discontented or lazy blacks. It was widespread all over the North. The revolutionaries decided to rebel when Toussaint Louverture was at Petite Riviere, attending the wedding of Dessalines. The movement should have begun in Cap-Haïtien on September 21st, but Christophe heard of it just in the nick of time and went to the town. On the 22nd and the 23rd, the revolt burst in the revolutionary districts of Marmalade, Plaisance, Limbe, Port Margot, and Don, home of the famous regiment of the sans-culottes. I'm sans-culottes right now. Sans-culottes is the heart of the revolution. The sans-culottes are the ones that stormed the Bastille. But if Napoleon was there, Mr. Culottes himself, he would have been killing the sans-culottes. Napoleon was the enemy of the revolution. Fuck Napoleon. Have I made that clear yet? On the morning of the 23rd, the revolution broke out in Cap Haitian, while armed bands killing all the white planters, the French slavers whom they had met on the way. I guess they're not slave. Well, they're kind of slavers still. Hell, Toussaint's kind of a slaver. Even in the 1801 Constitution, he's going to allow for the importation of cultivators. So he's going to allow more slaves to be imported onto the island. What was the nature of their slave state? Were the new blacks coming onto the island citizens, or would they have to be slaves to somebody? So Henry Christophe defeated all these, cities, all these rebellions, these uprisings. Toussaint Dessalines marched against the rising in Marmalade and Don. It fell to pieces before him and his terrible lieutenant. Moyse, avoiding a meeting with Toussaint, attacked and defeated another band, but blacks in certain districts had revolted to the cry of "Long live Moyse!" They want to put Moyse in charge over Toussaint. Overthrow Toussaint, put Moyse in charge. Toussaint Louverture then, out of jealousy, had Moyse arrested. That was his adopted nephew. He just showed too much love for the French planters and not enough love for the blacks and the mulattoes. And that's who Moyse was trying to unionize, the blacks and the mulattoes, the slaves and the ones of African descent. He could not be the executioner of his own race. Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, they didn't mind executing their own race. In fact, they seemed to prefer it over having to kill the French planters. Right now, they're going to kill Moyse and his rebellion, even though they're going to be fighting the French in just 1 or 2 years later. But they're killing Moyse for the same thing they're going to do in just a year afterwards. And they're going to shoot Moyse with grape shot. Toussaint Louverture is going to put him in front of a cannon, and they're going to blow him to pieces with grape shot, which is just a bunch of balls, a bunch of cannonballs. So he's going to have a bunch of big cannonballs going through his body. That's how Moyse is going to go out. And he goes out like a badass, right? So he's in front of the firing squad, and he gave them the order. Fire, my friends, fire. Go ahead. 4 years after his death, Medou, the Haitian historian, gave an outline of Moyse's program. Toussaint refused to break up the large estate. So Toussaint Louverture wasn't going to break up the plantations, the encomiendas. He was going to keep that as it was. The plantations, the land, the materials, and put some workers on that land and then get that plantation up and running. That's how Toussaint looked at things. This is where Moyse is more revolutionary. He wasn't just a rebeller. He wasn't just fighting, against oppression, resistance against oppression, which is Article 2 of the Rights of Man, which France had declared in 1789, that the right to resist against oppression is an imprescriptible right, a human right, a natural right. Of course you're allowed to resist oppression. Of course you are. So when Toussaint Louverture refused to break up the large estates, Moyse wanted small grants of land for his junior officers, and even the rank and file. So his men, his people, he wanted them to have their own land. He was in favor of land reform. This is just like Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck, when he took over Germany, he initiates this reform that breaks up all these large land holdings, but he did it to the sons. So he just said that the father's land is now divided between the sons. So that was land reform, and that's good land reform because it makes more citizens out of people, it gives people land, it creates this agrarian society that Thomas Jefferson had envisioned, that he thought was a good vision. Land reform has happened all over the place. We had land reform here in the 1860s under Abraham Lincoln. He was passing out 160 acres tracts of land. Of course, it was the Mexicans and the Indians, but all you had to do was just sign an application, promise that you'll take care of the land for 5 years, and after 5 years, 160 acres was yours, free and clear. That was land reform. So Abraham Lincoln had land reform. Hugo Chavez had land reform, and he said that he was copying Abraham Lincoln's land reform. So, and then they send county agents out to help the new landowners. So whenever people want to talk about that they're against socialism, you got, all those, who was it, the bird sanctuary, those who overthrew the bird sanctuary, the guy with the cowboy hat, Clyde Bundy. Cliven Bundy. Where did Cliven Bundy get his land from? Did he get his land from Abraham Lincoln 100 years ago? If so, then he needs to get that land back. You're going to sit there and be against socialism when your entire life depended upon free land that you got from the government? You can't get no more socialistic than that. In fact, all revolutions are the battle over land. Article 2 of the Declaration of the Rights of Man of Citizen says that there were many rights of man. They said that the rights was liberty, property, safety, and the resistance against oppression. It also says, Article 3 says that the principle of any sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. No body or individual can exert authority which does not emanate expressly from it. If you do not get your authority from the nation, then nobody, no individual can say that they are revolutionary. Napoleon, he didn't get his authority from the nation. He didn't get his authority from the French nation. He's a coup d'etat. He's a fucking scallywag. Because of Hugo Chavez, 60,000 families now have land. So by the end of 2003, 60,000 new families have land. And it's not going to turn around right away, but I think in the long run, exactly, they give them their own land. Now you could raise your own food, right? You're going to live. You're going to survive. In the very beginning of the American Revolution, or the country of America, you couldn't vote unless you owned land. You weren't even a person. You weren't even a citizen. I wouldn't have had the right to vote if I was in George Washington's America. And the majority of whites didn't have the right to vote. So basically the aristocracy was still in power after the American Revolution. There's been land reforms in Brazil, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Guatemala, Mexico, Nicaragua, Peru, Venezuela, the Ottoman Empire, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Maghreb, Syria, Albania, Estonia, Finland, Ireland, Russia, and the Soviet Union, Britain, Sweden, Scotland, Ethiopia, Kenya, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Canada. In the U.S., there was Sherman's 40 acres and a mule promise. In Asia, Afghanistan, China, India, Japan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam. There's some people that understand revolution. There's some people that understand citizenship and power. You need to be standing on your own land. To be a man, to be a full man, you need to be standing on your own land. And when you're standing on your own land, you get the respect of others, but you also have a sanctuary. You got a place to put all your stuff, to save all your things, and you can stand on your own feet. I'm allowed to stand right here. Let's just quickly talk about Bolivia's land reform. So Bolivia elected a socialist leader, Evo Morales, 10 years ago or so. 92% of all the cultivable land, all the land that could be cultivated, were held by large estates. 92% of Bolivia were held by the elite. And then the Bolivian National Revolution of 1952 they abolished the forced peasantry labor, so slavery. They established a program of expropriation and distribution of the royal property of the traditional landlords to the Indian peasants. So this is 1952. They went around, the organizations of peasants were called syndicates, and they went around and gave land to these syndicates. Peasants were not only granted land, but their militias were also given large supplies of arms. The peasants remained a powerful political force in Bolivia during all subsequent governments. By 1970, 45% of peasant families had received title to their land. 45% peasants. These were slaves. Now they had their own land. They had their own land, and land reform projects continued in the 70s and 80s. 1996, agrarian reform law increased the protection for small holdings and indigenous territories, but they also protected absentee landlords who didn't pay their taxes, so that's not a very good absentee landlords. Fuck absentee landlords. But now they've elected a socialist leader. They've elected a socialist leader. There was a time when the United States would assassinate any country in South America who elected a socialist leader, but not Evo Morales. So Evo Morales was saved by that's a Kissinger tactic. So Hillary Clinton probably wanted to kill all these socialist presidents, all these Bernie Sanders of South America. Hillary Clinton loved Kissinger, and Kissinger killed Salvador Allende in Chile because he was a socialist. He was elected as the socialist president. That was his only crime. Moyse looked up to Sonthonax. Sonthonax is going to be the one who actually abolished slavery in Haiti in 1793, and then Paris is going to follow Sonthonax's lead. in 1794, February 4th, 1794. So Moyse was pretty profound, right? He wasn't just clearly anti-white. He did prefer the laborers over the oppressors, the overseers, but he wasn't anti-white. He liked Santonax. He hated Roume, R-O-U-M-E. He also hated Heduville, right? But they were shitty people, so they were very hateable. The old slave owners hated Moyse. They absolutely hated him, and they kept pressing Toussaint to get rid of him. Henry Christophe was also jealous of Moyse. Henry Christophe loved white society. So these, Stockholm Syndrome. So whether or not Moyse was guilty of treason, because all the revolutionaries were saying, long live Moyse, his fate was sealed once they had him captured. That's why they killed him. The next person after Toussaint Louverture, Moyse. Moyse was the one who symbolized the revolution. And once Moyse was killed, the blacks of the North, they're already angry at Toussaint's policy. The final disillusionment was the execution of Moyse. One of the main reasons why they wanted to take over the Spanish side of Haiti was because they were important Africans in from the Spanish side. So the blacks were ready to fight and take over the right side of Haiti, where Moyse, right, Moyse was there. He led the laborers against Heduville. He helped lead the insurrection, which extorted the authority from Roume, and to take over the Spanish Domingo, an insurrection which the laborers had been for the purpose of stopping the Spanish traffic in slaves. Moyse had arrested Roume and later Vincent. Now Toussaint had shot him for taking the part of the blacks against the whites. Moyse was the soul of the insurrection, but he was also the soul of the revolution, and he was too high in Toussaint Louverture's councils for way too long. Toussaint Louverture, this is kind of like Robespierre. Robespierre executed an ally, and then that's when Robespierre was killed. Toussaint Louverture just executed one of his most devoted and accomplished followers, Moyse, who was in favor of land reform. If Moyse had been allowed to implement his land reform, Haiti would be in a much better position today. Much better position. If land reform could have got it into the Constitution of 1801, Haiti would be succeeding leaps and bounds over everybody. So in the districts of the insurrection, Toussaint Louverture didn't give a shit why they were fighting, why they were rebelling. He shot them without mercy. He lined up the laborers, spoke to them in turn. If they gave a stumbling answer, if they showed any bit of uncertainty, he shot them and he killed them. Only by his power was he going to make them submit, not by his moral authority, not by his reverent power, but by his fascist power. So Moyse was there in the very beginning of the revolution. Moyse was there at Fort Liberté, and he had been instrumental in Heduville's expulsion. In Moyse's company, Toussaint was less guarded than usual, so he could speak freely to Moyse. He could tell Moyse his problems and what he was actually thinking. Moyse believed in Toussaint. Toussaint just didn't believe in Moyse. Moyse, he says this: the French are no good in this country, and there's no one but them who trouble us. But I will do so much to them that I will oblige them all to leave and abandon their properties. If I was in power, if it was in my power, I would get rid of them. That should be one less job to do. What one has begun, one must finish. Let France send her forces here. What will they do? Nothing. I wish you would send 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 men. That would be so many more guns and ammunition for our brothers who are not armed. When we first began to fight for our liberty, we only had 1 gun, then 2, then 3, and we finished by having all the guns that the French had when they came here. So in the fall of 1801, Moyse became the focal point of a gathering discontent with Toussaint's draconian labor policy. And of course there was suspicion with his friendliness with the French planter class, the former slavers, who were now overseers of a de facto. And then the land that Moyse helped Toussaint to get on the Spanish side, he wouldn't even allow land in the Spanish side of Haiti to be sold in small increments. They could only be sold in increments of 200 acres. 200 acres. So he forbade the sale of small land deals. Only large land deals, only the planter class, only plantations. That's all Toussaint Louverture wanted. If he truly believed in the freedom of the black man, if he truly wanted to help his own economy, give everybody their own plot of ground and then see how much they could raise on their own. See how much they could produce on their own. All their labor would be theirs. And you should own your own labor. Why would somebody else own your labor? I raise these tomatoes These tomatoes should be mine. I built this house should be mine. I worked for my stuff, I saved my things, all that should be mine. But the culture goes back to the days in the very beginning with the sugar plantations. The slaves weren't even allowed to take a taste of the sugar. They couldn't even take a taste. Couldn't even have a taste of it. Even though they were supplying the entire world with sugar, they couldn't take a taste. So Toussaint made Moysey the commander of the northern department, and he had Dessalines take over the west or the south. Dessalines didn't mind, smashing people, killing people, making them work. Moysey had a problem with that. He didn't like being so repressive, and he didn't like killing his own people. He's not the executor of his own color. He knows who the enemy is. He sees it very clearly, and I bet a lot of black people in Haiti saw who the enemy was, in spite of Louverture, Dessalines, Christophe, and all these kiss-ass sycophants, Stockholm Syndrome inflicted, French-loving, escargot-loving, frog-eating. They loved the racist French, who thought of them as nothing but niggers. That's all they thought of them as. On the night of October 29th, a revolt broke out on the northern plain in the style of the First Rising of 1791 in Crocodile Forest with the Voodoo celebration. Whites were massacred from Fort Liberté to the gates of Camp Francois, Cap Haitian. The new insurrection swept all over the northern department within 2 days, carrying the towns of Dondon, Acul, Plaisance, Port Margot, and Limbe. The war cry of the rebels was, "General Moyse is with us. Death to all the whites." Joseph Flaville, the ever insubordinate commandant of Limbe, slaughtered the last refugees on the waterfront there as they were trying to find boats to... Man, Joseph Flaville, what an asshole, right? What an asshole. Bayon de Libertat, and this might be what got into Toussaint Louverture's crawl. His former master and old friend was counted among the dead. Bayon de Libertat would die because of Moyse's rebellion. Moyse said this: "Whatever my old uncle does," he had said, "I cannot resign myself to be the executioner of my race. He is always chewing me out for the interest of the metropole, but those are the interests of the whites, and I won't love the whites until they give me back the eye that made me lose in battle." This rebellion happened while Dessalines was trying to marry Marie Claire Herousseau, they filmed a color he met during the siege of Jacmel. Marie Claire persuaded Dessalines to allow her to bring medical supplies through his lines to nurse the sick and wounded in the surrounded town. The wedding festivities cost 100,000 livres and went on for 3 days, took place at Petite Riviere in the Artibonite region. Toussaint joined the celebration, though he had to tear himself away from La Dame Fizor to do so. Moyse, who had other plans, did not attend. Unfortunately for Moyse, Henry Christophe also skipped Dessalines' wedding and was in position to shut down the revolt inside the gates of Camp Francois before it had begun. He arrested a ringleader named Troy Baulace and soon extracted enough information from him, he was name-dropping. This Troy Baulace was name-dropping like a motherfucker, and he was able to make 30 more arrests. So Henry Christophe caught Troy Baulace, and then he caught 30 more, arrested 30 more. Within 24 hours, he was able to reassure the American merchants and agents who had fled to their ships at the first signs of trouble that Cap Haitian had returned to good order. Next, Christophe subdued Limbe, Port Margot, and Acul. He captured Joseph Flaville in the process. General Vernet soon regained Plaisance. Before the cathedral at the Place des Armes, Joseph Flaville was a prisoner at Cap Haitian. Toussaint ordered him and the other conspirators to be blown into pieces by grape shot. That's how he's going to kill Moyse. He's going to kill Moyse by grape shot, just like Count Pulaski had died at the siege of Savannah. In a similar scene at Fort Liberté, the rebel Captain Hilarion was bayoneted. And it was not Hilarion. Hilarious. It was Hilarion. And remember these names. Joseph Flaville was a black revolutionary, a Haitian revolutionary who Toussaint Louverture had killed. Captain Hilarion was a Haitian revolutionary who Toussaint Louverture had killed. In the hills above Cap Haitian, Toussaint slaughtered 100-odd cultivators who had joined the rebellion. He conducted similar exemplary executions all across the northern plain. For years afterwards, the residents of Trou du Nord pointed out an old camite tree around whose trunk the rebels of that region had been massacred. Dessalines was doing the same thing on the plantations where the white owners had been slain. He massacred the entire work gang, all of them, whether they were involved with it or not. He didn't give a shit. How dare you insult the whites? These good white people, these good white plantation owners, former slavers, they're good. They're making us money, and you're fucking that up. You're fucking our money up. In the very beginning, with the 1791 uprising, Toussaint and all these leaders were willing to sell everybody out as long as the 50 leaders of the rebellion would get property. They would get property and land and houses as long as 50 of them, even though they were fighting for general slavery. Toussaint Louverture agreed to that. He agreed to it. So Toussaint Louverture was compromised from the beginning. So eventually Toussaint is going to confront Moysey, and he's like, hey, what's up with this? Well, Moysey, in order to defend himself, he goes to Don, and he goes ahead and arrests a bunch of people, and he puts down the rebellion himself. So Moysey, in order to show his loyalty to St. Louverture, that he didn't lead this insurrection, maybe to save his own ass, I'm not for sure why he did it, but he went to Don, and he's helping to kill these black revolutionaries. So Moysey's a bit compromised, but he's only doing it because Toussaint is saying, this is your fault, and if you don't clean this shit up, you're going to die. At Marmalade, the next town west along the Cordon de l'Ouest, Toussaint received Moysey as if his nephew might possibly still be a loyal subordinate commander. Everything leads me to believe that you're the author of this revolt, Toussaint told Moysey. Everywhere the rebels have been putting it out that they act in your name. Your honor depends on your justifying yourself. And the first way you do that is to bring everything back into good order, because if you are guilty, your general's rank will not save you. You're coming from Don. How many rebels have you punished there? None. How many have you had arrested? None. How can it be that you, commander of the Northern Department, come from a quarter where horrible assassinations have been committed and you have not arrested anybody or punished anyone? Go back to Don. Have the guilty parties arrested, but don't have anyone shot. Let them be brought to me alive and under sure guard. So could you imagine that? All these people who are rebelling on behalf of Moysey, Moysey is going to go back to them and they're going to be friendly to him. Hey, Moysey, what's going on? He's like, oh, you're arrested. Sorry. I mean, shit. And Moysey does this. So did he lead the rebellion, or was this just a wildcat strike? Was this just like 1791? It just happened. It just happened. So he went back to Don, and Moysey obeyed Toussaint. He arrested 24 men. He shot 13 of them. 24 men were arrested. 13 were shot and killed. So he had the 11 sent back to Toussaint. But apparently it was long live Moysey. Moysey or death. They loved Moysey, and because the revolutionaries had been screaming that, Toussaint just couldn't get over it. So it seemed like Toussaint was throwing him a life raft, right? He was throwing him a safety vessel. He gave him one last shot, and he did what Toussaint wanted. But apparently that wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough that Moysey went out and killed his own black followers, his own black supporters, other black revolutionaries, but that wasn't good enough for Toussaint. Dessalines hated Moysey. Dessalines is putting pressure on Toussaint to kill Moysey, right? You got to kill Moysey. Now part of the Canton Louverture, the town was under Dessalines' command. Moysey passed briefly through Le Cap without finding much of a welcome. When he returned to Don, the inhabitants shuttered themselves in their houses. So when you turn on your own people, they're going to, that probably hurt the people of Moysey, Moysey's rebellion was hurt by Moysey turning on his own revolutionaries. So a lot of times the revolution makes the man. Toussaint, he is very flawed, but he took the leadership role of this revolution. So the revolution forced Toussaint. The revolution made Toussaint. And the revolution could have made Moysey, but instead of going along with the revolution, instead of standing up against Toussaint, he loved Toussaint just like Toussaint loved Napoleon. Just like Toussaint loved the white French planter class, that's how he loved Toussaint. Maybe Toussaint hoped that Moysey would just leave the colony on his own, but Moysey was too stubborn to depart. During a conference at the Harcourt plantation, Christophe and Dessalines persuaded Toussaint Louverture that Moysey must be disposed of. Dessalines insisted that Toussaint must get rid of him altogether. Toussaint ordered Moysey's arrest and had him confined in the fort of Port-de-Paix. By that time, all of his secretaries, aides, and junior officers had been executed for their part in the revolt. So Moysey was convicted on the testimony of these dead men. Brought before a firing squad, Moysey himself gave the order to fire. Fire, my friends, fire. So because of Moysey's rebellion, you're going to see Moysey dead, and you're going to see the Bayon de Libertant. So the Bayon de Libertant, his former master and his greatest revolutionary, is going to die. So that's going to be a blow to Toussaint's conscience, to his psyche. So you have the French. Paul Verrel wrote in June, this is 1793, 94, 95, the beginning of the revolution. Toussaint Louverture was a revolutionary in the beginning. He was a revolutionary kind of at the end, but most of the time Toussaint Louverture is not a revolutionary during the Haitian Revolution at all. There was three royalist African chiefs who were being sponsored by the Spanish. Toussaint Louverture was one of them. You also had George Biassou and Jean-Francois Papillon. So Papillon and Biassou and Toussaint Louverture were all fighting for the Spanish against the French in the very beginning. Actually, he'll hear about Santo's Emancipation Proclamation, and so he didn't trust the Spanish. He thought the Spanish just wanted the slaves and the French to kill as many of each other as possible, so they could just come in and take over everybody. So he didn't trust the Spanish, and when they went ahead and passed the Emancipation Proclamation, that convinced Toussaint Louverture to come back to the French side. Along with Toussaint Louverture came more than 4,000 troops, 3 veteran officers who would leave a profound mark on the Haitian, the history of Haiti, the Haitian Revolution specifically. Henry Christophe, who had been free before the Revolution, and the former slaves, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Moyse. Moyse was there in the very beginning, in the first uprising, in the first war for independence. Moyse was there. Not only did Moyse not want to beat up the cultivators and the black people who were working for these former masters, he also wanted to sell them small plots of land to the soldiers, and going against Louverture's stated aim of preventing the division of plantations. He wanted to keep the encomienda system together, but Moyse also wanted them to be paid. He was saying, no, we need to pay these guys, okay? We're not just giving them food and housing and whatnot. We're going to give them money. So, late October 1801, several hundred whites in the region were killed. Louverture responded swiftly, sending in Dessalines to suppress the revolt with brutal efficiency. Christophe, commander of Le Cap-Capation, unearthed and crushed a parallel conspiracy in the town. In the wake of the uprising, Louverture summoned Moyse, accused him of being its sole leader. You took up arms because you thought the whites were once again becoming your masters, Louverture apparently told his nephew, adding, could I, a former slave, work towards the reestablishment of servitude? Moyse insisted that he had not organized the revolt, though it seems at the very least he did not do anything to stop it. Tacitly, he supported it. Louverture was convinced of Moyse's guilt, so in late November, along with Joseph Flaville, another veteran officer, Moyse was executed. Right after Moyse's rebellion, Louverture issues a proclamation where he acts as both the dictator and the preacher, and he sits there and he just talks about how he's the father and how he had to punish his children. So the same paternalism that the French had to St. Louverture is the same paternalism that he has for the Haitian people. So Louverture railed against Moyse. Louverture said that for years he tried to explain to Moyse how to be a virtuous soldier, how to be disciplined, how to be obedient, how to be a virtuous man. But instead of listening to the advice of the father, to the orders of a chief devoted to the happiness of the colony, Moyse let himself be guided only by his passions. The result, he's perished miserably. This will be the fate of all who imitate him, Louverture warned ominously. The justice of heaven is slow, but it is infallible, and sooner or later it strikes the wicked and crushes them like thunder. Louverture didn't just content himself with going after Moyse, he went after the entire population. He went after the men who didn't have religion, who caused disorders in the colony. He blamed such disorders on bad parenting, the negligence with which fathers and mothers raised their children, shirking religion, obedience, and love of work, instead passing on a disdain for cultivation. Since bad impressions are difficult to get rid of, the result was the proliferation of bad citizens, vagabonds, thieves. The girls became prostitutes, always ready to follow the urgings of the first conspirator who preaches disorder, assassination, and pillage. Indeed, because the war had killed many more men than women, the towns were full of women whose existence is based wholly on libertinage, and who incited others to banditry. The police and officers of the colony must constantly keep their eyes open and be ready to punish all such vile and dangerous individuals. Louverture also declared that any married officers or administrators who accepted concubines in their houses or who were unmarried but lived publicly with several women would be fired. The plantations were also full of dangerous men and women. Since the Revolution, Louverture claimed perverse men had declared that liberty was the right to remain idle, to do with impunity, to disdain the laws and follow only their whims. Such a doctrine was, of course, accepted happily by bad subjects, thieves, and assassins. It's time to strike out against the hardened men who persist in these ideas. All must know that there is no way to live peacefully and respectfully except through work, assiduous work. As soon as a child can walk, Louverture declared he must be put to work on the plantation, doing something useful. In a well-ordered state, he explained, idleness is the source of all disorders. Domestics, too, needed stricter surveillance by those they worked for, who should treat them with justice, but also force them to their duty. For since in the new regime all work deserves a salary, each salary demands work. Louverture's proclamation demanded the strict enforcement of his October 1800 regulations on cultivation. He ratcheted up his threats against the officers and administrators who refused to enforce this decree assiduously. So don't be like Moyse. Any officer who tolerated laziness or vagrancy was an enemy of the government. Any who tolerated pillage and assassination was to be executed. Any individual who encouraged sedition would also be punished with death. Toussaint Louverture ordered the creation of a new system of surveillance. He ordered managers and owners to draw up lists of the laborers on their property to be used for fixing cultivators on the plantations. Security cards listing each individual's name, address, employment, age, and sex were to be issued by local officials. A fee would be charged, and they would be given only to those who had a job and demonstrated irreproachable conduct. Domestics had to present a certificate of good conduct from their employers to get the cards. Those who cannot present them on demand would be punished. Foreigners, especially metropolitans, that is, European-born Frenchmen without documents, would be deported. Well, that's interesting. The French planters who committed the same crime were deported, but the blacks were punished, beat, flogged, killed, whipped. So Louverture is creating a brand new police state, a new plantation society. He had the decree read after mass by all the priests in the colony and bureaucratic vote. Later on, in 1802, Louverture would brag the colony was enjoying the greatest tranquility and that commerce and cultivation were flourishing. The island had reached a degree of splendor that had never been seen before. He had been accused of treating the cultivators as slaves, but all he was trying to do was to increase the general happiness of the island by making the people of St. Domingo take liberty without license. He added, succeeded to the point that you could not see a single idle man in the colony, and the number of beggars had decreased. Never have order and tranquility reigned so widely in St. Domingo, concurred a French officer in January 1802. According to Charles Leclerc, he said that the plantations were actually very efficient, and he was, and he was blown away by how the blacks were actually working harder under Toussaint Louverture than what they had worked under the French planters. So this was slavery. This was a worse slavery than what was being performed before. Some reason he kept saying that he was in favor of liberty but not license. So yeah, you can be free, but I don't give you permission to be free. I don't give you license to be free. You can be free, but that doesn't mean you deserve license to be free. What the fuck? So Charles Leclerc was able to get his commission because he married Napoleon's sister, Pauline. So marry the Führer's sister and you get to become a general. Toussaint Louverture's sons, Isaac and Placide, was actually on the boat with Leclerc. Charles Leclerc had brought his sons, not as a gesture of goodwill, but to hold them hostage in order to get Toussaint to submit. But it just shows you how much Toussaint Louverture loved the French people. He was willing to give the French his sons to educate them in the ways of the French and to educate them of the French ways. But instead of being overcome with pride that Toussaint, that this black general in this colony, loved France so much he was willing to give his sons to be educated. Instead, the leaders, Napoleon, said, well, fuck him, his sons are right here in these universities. We could just kidnap them and use them as hostage. Overall, when it comes to what were the successes of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, there aren't that many. The American Revolution, the only thing I can think of is really the separation of powers and the Bill of Rights. But they kept the same established order. The established order didn't change. Rich white men got to control everything and nobody else got any power whatsoever, just like how the British had it. In the French Revolution, they killed the king and the queen. So that is a line of demarcation, right, between the royalist monarchies of days of yore, to this brand new experiment that we're doing now. So the killing of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette ends the royal bloodlines, just like when the Bolsheviks had killed the Romanovs. That ends the bloodlines. Just like how Trump says that you must destroy the families of the wicked terrorists, those who use violence to terrorize others. That's what the Bolshevik and the French Revolution did. Killing Louis XVI and Marie also signaled the end of hereditary succession. So not only are you not going to have these royal families anymore, their daughters and sons aren't just going to come out of the woodwork and take over power either. We're going to have a different way to transfer power from here on out. Probably election. We're going to have a republic. The leaders will be based upon the consent of the governed, so some sort of representative democracy. Instead of resurrecting chambermaid rapers to be king, instead we're actually going to try to find the most, at least the biggest bullshit artist who could control and convince the majority of the people that they were in a position to lead. France also banned feudal fees, but the biggest accomplishment of the French Revolution was the abolition of slavery, February 4th, 1794, by Robespierre's Jacobin government. Biggest successes of the American Revolution was the Bill of Rights, which we barely got, and the separation of powers. And with the French Revolution, their Declaration of Independence, Dessalines' Declaration of Independence, Toussaint Louverture's 1801 Haitian Constitution, and Moyse's land reform. If Moyse's land reform would have been implemented, Haiti would be soaring today. It wouldn't be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They would be kicking ass and taking names. In fact, they could use land reform today. Hell, America could use land reform today. I bet France could use land reform today, too. And, of course, Haiti's revolution abolished slavery to pieces, right? They abolished the shit out of slavery. It's never been abolished. Slavery has never been abolished like it was abolished in, it was so profound. That's the magic, I guess, of the Haitian Revolution. The slaves rebelled, and now they got their own country. That's profound. It's profound. So France declared the end of slavery, but they reinstated it later on. But when Haiti abolished their slavery, not only did they abolish slavery on their own island, but they abolished slavery all across the world, the entire world. How could you not look at Haiti as a spiritual leader if you're an African who's being dominated by the French or the Germans or whoever is colonizing Africa at the time? If you're a black person on the plantations in the United States and you heard about the Haitian Revolution, how could you not think about your own freedom? End of chapter 7.